Her heart stopped as the black SUV pulled into the diner parking lot. He was here. Ethan Cross, the Mafia boss who controlled everything in her life, was back, and this time, she had no escape. She thought she was safe. She thought she was free. But now, with her past closing in, she was faced with an impossible choice: run, or give in to the man who would stop at nothing to drag her back into his world. She was trapped, and the clock was ticking. Evelyn froze, the coffee pot in her hand shaking. The quiet of the diner, the routine she had so carefully built, all felt fragile now. She glanced toward the window, her breath catching when she saw the familiar black SUV parked across the lot. She tried to keep her hands steady as she wiped down the counter. Every muscle in her body tensed. No, it couldn't be. She had buried her past in this small town. This life, this peace was supposed to be hers, free from him, from the violence that had ruled her every step. But the engine of the SUV roared to life, and her worst fear became a reality. Ethan had found her. Her mind raced. She couldn't think clearly. She needed to stay calm, but it was too late. Her past was here, walking toward her with every step, and she had no idea what he wanted. He was still the same Ethan, the ruthless man who owned her heart and life, and she wasn't sure anymore which was more dangerous, facing him or running. The bell above the door chimed, and Evelyn's breath caught. She didn't have to look up to know he was standing there. She could feel him, his presence, his control, even before his voice cut through the silence. "Coffee," he said, his tone as commanding as ever. Evelyn Carter thought she had outrun her past. For 6 months, she lived a quiet, uneventful life in the small town of Briarwood, hidden from the dangers she had left behind. But when Ethan Cross, the Mafia boss who once controlled every aspect of her life, steps back into her world, everything she's worked to bury comes rushing to the surface. Now, Evelyn faces a choice: run once again, or confront the man who's determined to bring her back into the darkness she fought so hard to escape. Life in Briarwood had been a carefully orchestrated routine for Evelyn. She worked as a waitress at the Cornerstone Cafe, a small-town diner where everyone knew your name but never asked too many questions. It wasn't much, but it was enough. She served coffee, wiped down the tables, and shared small talk with the regulars who came in every morning. The days were long, but predictable, and most importantly, safe. Her daughter, Lily, had become her world. Together, they lived in a modest apartment above a bakery, far from the memories of the life Evelyn had run from. The streets were quiet, the people were kind, and Evelyn had settled into the routine of anonymity. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to breathe. The past, with all its violence and chaos, felt like a distant nightmare. But Evelyn knew, deep down, that safety in a town like Briarwood was fragile. She had tried to outrun Ethan Cross, the ruthless Mafia boss who had once held her captive, both emotionally and physically. The fear of his control had been suffocating. She had planned her escape meticulously, vanishing without a trace from the underworld he ruled. But no matter how far she ran, Evelyn knew Ethan would always be one step behind, and the peace she had fought for would never last. It was a quiet Tuesday night, rain tapping softly against the window panes as Evelyn poured a fresh cup of coffee for a lonely traveler sitting by the window. As she set the mug down, she caught a glimpse of movement from the corner of her eye. A sleek black SUV had pulled up outside the cafe, the headlights cutting through the fog. Her heart skipped a beat. She had seen that car before. When the door opened, and a tall, familiar figure stepped inside, Evelyn's blood ran cold. Ethan, her past had found her. The man who had once ruled her every thought, her every move, was standing in front of her once again. His presence filled the room, dark and commanding, like a storm ready to swallow everything in its path. He was still the same sharp eyes, hardened face, and that same dangerous aura that had always haunted her. Evelyn froze. Her heart pounded in her chest as she fought to keep her composure. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. She had worked so hard to escape him, to start over. But Ethan wasn't the kind of man you could outrun. Not for long. As she forced herself to look away from Ethan, the weight of her past pressed down on her. It was impossible to ignore the memories that flooded back. The lavish parties, the whispered threats, and the chilling sense of control Ethan had always had over her. When she'd first met him, he had been charming, magnetic, everything she had been drawn to. But soon, his love turned into an obsession, and his world became one of violence, manipulation, and fear. Evelyn had tried to break free. The night she left was one she would never forget. The rush of adrenaline, the sound of her heart hammering in her chest as she snuck away, leaving behind the life she had known. She had been careful, smart, but even now, she couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan was always watching, waiting for the right moment to pull her back into his world. And now, here he was, standing in front of her, as if the last 6 months had meant nothing. Evelyn's world, so carefully rebuilt, was crumbling before her eyes. She had been running, but in Briarwood, as peaceful as it seemed, there was no escape from the shadow of Ethan Cross. The cafe was quiet, save for the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock and the occasional clink of silverware. Evelyn stood frozen behind the counter, her breath caught in her throat. Ethan Cross, the man who had once owned her life, stood in front of her like a dark storm. His presence so overpowering it made the air feel heavier, suffocating. He hadn't changed. His black suit, sharp and pristine, still held that same menacing edge. His eyes, dark as night, pierced through her with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. His jaw was set, his lips barely moving as he spoke. "Long time no see, Evelyn." The words fell from his lips like a cold promise. He didn't need to say more. She knew him too well. She could see the calculation in his gaze, the same ruthless determination that had once been the foundation of their dangerous relationship. Her heart raced in her chest. She had been preparing for this moment for 6 months, ever since she'd fled Harbor City, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality of seeing him again. He was no longer the man she had once known. He was something darker, more dangerous, a predator who had been watching her every move. "How did you find me?" she managed, her voice tight, almost a whisper. Ethan's lips curled into a cold smile. "You really think you could disappear, Evelyn? You don't know me at all." He took a step closer, his movements deliberate, slow. The air between them thickened as memories of their past began to resurface. His touch, his voice, the suffocating grip he had held over her. She could still feel the weight of it, the way he had controlled her every move, every decision. But she was different now. She had fought to escape him. She had built a new life, a safer life. "Get away from me," she snapped, her words shaking but firm. "I've left that life behind. I don't want anything to do with you anymore." Ethan's eyes flashed, darkening with something that could only be described as possessiveness. He was no stranger to rejection, but this was different. Evelyn wasn't just rejecting him. She was rejecting everything he had built, everything he controlled. It stung in a way he hadn't anticipated. "You're wrong, Evelyn," he said, his voice lower now, more dangerous. "You think you've escaped me, but I've been watching you. Every move, every step you've taken since the day you left. You think you're safe here, in this little town, but you're not. The syndicate you ran from," he paused, letting the weight of the words settle in. "They've found you. They know exactly where you are, and soon they'll come for you. And when they do, it won't matter where you hide." Evelyn's pulse quickened. The words hit harder than she expected. The very thing she had feared, the thing she had tried so hard to outrun, was closing in on her. She thought she had left it behind, buried it in the quiet corners of Briarwood. But there was no escaping her past. Not really. "You're lying," she said, her voice trembling, though she tried to keep her composure. "I'm done with that life. I don't care about the syndicate. I don't care about any of it." Ethan took another step forward, his gaze never leaving hers. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a piece of paper, tossing it onto the counter in front of her. Evelyn's eyes flicked down to the paper, and her stomach twisted when she saw the name printed across it, Lily Carter, her daughter. "You're not fooling anyone," Ethan continued. "They'll come for her too, Evelyn. The moment they realize you're the woman who used to be with me, they'll use her against you. I'm offering you protection, my protection, but it comes with a price." Evelyn felt a wave of nausea crash over her. The idea of anyone, especially Ethan, using Lily as leverage made her blood boil. She would die before she let that happen. She had already lost too much because of Ethan. Her freedom, her peace, her dignity. She slammed her hand onto the counter, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "What do you want from me, Ethan? You've already taken everything else." A flicker of something unreadable passed through his eyes. For a moment, Evelyn almost believed she saw remorse there, but it was quickly buried beneath his usual cold, calculating demeanor. "I want you to help me, Evelyn. You know the syndicate better than anyone. Their operations, their weaknesses. You're a valuable asset, and I need that information. In exchange, I'll protect you. I'll keep Lily safe, but I need you to cooperate." Evelyn recoiled, shaking her head. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Cooperate? After everything? After everything he had done to her? I can't, she whispered, her voice strained. You don't get to decide that for me anymore. Ethan stepped forward again, his presence overwhelming. He reached out, his fingers brushing against her arm in a gesture that was almost tender, but the chill in his touch was unmistakable. I'm not asking, Evelyn. I'm offering you a chance to live, to keep your daughter alive, to keep both of you out of harm's way. You don't want to go back to that life, I know, and neither do I. For a moment, Evelyn wanted to scream, to throw him out, to do anything to make him go away. But the truth gnawed at her. As much as she hated it, as much as she resented him for even suggesting it, she knew Ethan was right. The Volkovs were closing in. She had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Her carefully constructed life was about to unravel, and this was the only way to protect Lily. The weight of it hit her like a physical blow. She couldn't keep running. Not anymore. Fine, she said through gritted teeth, her voice thick with unwilling acceptance. I'll help you, but don't ever use my daughter against me again. Ethan's lips curled into a smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. I'll take that as a yes. But remember, Evelyn, you're in my world now, and there's no going back. Evelyn swallowed hard. She didn't want to play his game, but she had no choice. She had made a promise to herself that she would protect Lily no matter what, even if it meant crossing back into the dangerous world of Ethan Cross. With that, the deal was struck, and Evelyn knew, deep down, that nothing would ever be the same again. The cafe was quiet, save for the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock and the occasional clink of silverware. Evelyn stood frozen behind the counter, her breath caught in her throat. Ethan Cross, the man who had once owned her life, stood in front of her like a dark storm, his presence so overpowering it made the air feel heavier, suffocating. He hadn't changed. His black suit, sharp and pristine, still held that same menacing edge. His eyes, dark as night, pierced through her with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. His jaw was set, his lips barely moving as he spoke. Long time no see, Evelyn. The words fell from his lips like a cold promise. He didn't need to say more. She knew him too well. She could see the calculation in his gaze, the same ruthless determination that had once been the foundation of their dangerous relationship. Her heart raced in her chest. She had been preparing for this moment for 6 months, ever since she'd fled Harbor City. But nothing could have prepared her for the reality of seeing him again. He was no longer the man she had once known. He was something darker, more dangerous, a predator who had been watching her every move. "How did you find me?" she managed, her voice tight, almost a whisper. Ethan's lips curled into a cold smile. "You really think you could disappear, Evelyn? You don't know me at all." He took a step closer, his movements deliberate, slow. The air between them thickened as memories of their past began to resurface his touch. His voice, the suffocating grip he had held over her. She could still feel the weight of it, the way he had controlled her every move, every decision. But she was different now. She had fought to escape him. She had built a new life, a safer life. "Get away from me," she snapped, her words shaking but firm. "I've left that life behind. I don't want anything to do with you anymore." Ethan's eyes flashed, darkening with something that could only be described as possessiveness. He was no stranger to rejection, but this was different. Evelyn wasn't just rejecting him. She was rejecting everything he had built, everything he controlled. It stung in a way he hadn't anticipated. "You're wrong, Evelyn," he said, his voice lower now, more dangerous. "You think you've escaped me, but I've been watching you. Every move, every step you've taken since the day you left. You think you're safe here, in this little town, but you're not. The syndicate you ran from..." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle in. "They've found you. They know exactly where you are, and soon they'll come for you, and when they do, it won't matter where you hide." Evelyn's pulse quickened. The words hit harder than she expected. The very thing she had feared, the thing she had tried so hard to outrun, was closing in on her. She thought she had left it behind, buried it in the quiet corners of Briarwood. But there was no escaping her past, not really. "You're lying," she said, her voice trembling, though she tried to keep her composure. "I'm done with that life. I don't care about the syndicate. I don't care about any of it." Ethan took another step forward, his gaze never leaving hers. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a piece of paper, tossing it onto the counter in front of her. Evelyn's eyes flicked down to the paper, and her stomach twisted when she saw the name printed across it. Lily Carter. Her daughter. "You're not fooling anyone," Ethan continued. They'll come for her too, Evelyn. The moment they realize you're the woman who used to be with me, they'll use her against you. I'm offering you protection. My protection. But it comes with a price. Evelyn felt a wave of nausea crash over her. The idea of anyone, especially Ethan, using Lily as leverage made her blood boil. She would die before she let that happen. She had already lost too much because of Ethan. Her freedom, her peace, her dignity. She slammed her hand onto the counter, the sound sharp in the quiet room. What do you want from me, Ethan? You've already taken everything else. A flicker of something unreadable passed through his eyes. For a moment, Evelyn almost believed she saw remorse there, but it was quickly buried beneath his usual cold, calculating demeanor. I want you to help me, Evelyn. You know the syndicate better than anyone. Their operations, their weaknesses. You're a valuable asset, and I need that information. In exchange, I'll protect you. I'll keep Lily safe, but I need you to cooperate. Evelyn recoiled, shaking her head. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Cooperate? After everything? After everything he had done to her? I can't, she whispered, her voice strained. You don't get to decide that for me anymore. Ethan stepped forward again, his presence overwhelming. He reached out, his fingers brushing against her arm in a gesture that was almost tender, but the chill in his touch was unmistakable. I'm not asking, Evelyn. I'm offering you a chance to live, to keep your daughter alive, to keep both of you out of harm's way. You don't want to go back to that life, I know, and neither do I. For a moment, Evelyn wanted to scream, to throw him out, to do anything to make him go away. But the truth gnawed at her. As much as she hated it, as much as she resented him for even suggesting it, she knew Ethan was right. The Volkovs were closing in. She had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Her carefully constructed life was about to unravel, and this was the only way to protect Lily. The weight of it hit her like a physical blow. She couldn't keep running. Not anymore. Fine, she said through gritted teeth, her voice thick with unwilling acceptance. I'll help you, but don't ever use my daughter against me again. Ethan's lips curled into a smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. I'll take that as a yes. But remember, Evelyn, you're in my world now, and there's no going back. Evelyn swallowed hard. She didn't want to play his game, but she had no choice. She had made a promise to herself that she would protect Lily no matter what, even if it meant crossing back into the dangerous world of Ethan Cross. With that, the deal was struck. And Evelyn knew, deep down, that nothing would ever be the same again. The sleek mansion loomed like a fortress against the dark sky, nestled in the hills on the outskirts of Briarwood. It was the kind of place that whispered power-polished marble floors, towering ceilings, and windows that seemed to stretch endlessly toward the stars. But to Evelyn, it felt more like a prison than a sanctuary. As she stepped inside, the chill of the air-conditioned interior was a sharp contrast to the warmth of the town she had left behind. It smelled of expensive leather, polished wood, and something darker that lingered in the corners, a scent she couldn't name but instinctively knew danger. Ethan stood a few feet ahead, watching her with those dark, unblinking eyes. His every movement was measured, deliberate, as if the very air around him was shaped by his will. Evelyn had known him in a different life, one that felt like a nightmare she'd finally woken from. But now, as she crossed the threshold of his world once more, she was reminded that some nightmares didn't end, they simply found new ways to torment you. Welcome home, Ethan said, his voice smooth as silk, but it didn't carry the warmth it once had. There was no trace of the man who had once held her close, whispered promises, and kissed her like he was the only one who could protect her. The man standing before her now was colder, harder, more dangerous than ever. Evelyn's throat tightened, but she said nothing. She didn't belong here, not in this world of power and wealth. She felt out of place, every inch of her being screaming that this was wrong. But she couldn't afford to be weak, not with Lily's safety on the line. A butler appeared silently at Ethan's side, bowing his head as he addressed them both. Dinner will be served in 20 minutes, Mr. Cross. Shall I have Miss Carter's things brought upstairs? Ethan gave a sharp nod, his gaze never leaving Evelyn. Yes, please. And have someone look into the latest intel. I want updates immediately. Evelyn's stomach churned. He was always so in control, never once showing a crack in his armor. She had spent so many years afraid of him. But now, as she stood here, she realized she wasn't the same woman she once was. She had fought to leave this world, and yet here she was, back in the lion's den, with no choice but to comply. Come with me, Ethan said, his tone leaving no room for argument. She followed him down a long hallway, her steps echoing off the cold, polished floors. The mansion was exactly as she expected, elegant and imposing, but sterile. No warmth, no life. Just a carefully curated image of power. Everything here was a tool, a piece of a larger game, and Evelyn was once again a pawn. They reached a large office at the end of the hallway, its doors opening with a soft click. Ethan moved behind a massive desk, sitting down with the ease of a man who had owned everything for far too long. He motioned for her to sit in the chair across from him. Evelyn hesitated but obeyed, taking a seat, though her heart was racing. The weight of the room felt suffocating. This was it, no turning back now. "You're here because I need you," Ethan said, his voice smooth but laced with an undeniable edge. "The Volkovs are a threat, and you know them better than anyone. You will help me neutralize them. But first, I need to know everything. Every detail, Evelyn. Every name. Every operation." Evelyn's chest tightened. She had spent so many months trying to forget the horrors of her past, the people she had once worked with, the cold, calculating figures who had controlled every part of her life. The Volkovs had been ruthless, their power reaching into every corner of Harbor City. She had been a tool to them, just as she had been for Ethan. But now, here she was again, a prisoner to this dark world. Ethan's eyes never wavered as he leaned forward, his gaze piercing her like a blade. "You think you can hide from me, Evelyn? You think that by running you've escaped? I know everything about you. I know every person you've spoken to, every safe house you've visited. Your freedom was a fantasy." The words hit her like a slap to the face. She had thought she was careful. She had thought she was hidden. But Ethan had been watching her the entire time, as he always had. He had always known where she was, what she was doing, who she was with. It made her skin crawl. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the edge of the desk. "Tell me about the Volkovs, the names of their leaders, their operations, their weaknesses." Evelyn's mind raced, her thoughts a blur of names and faces from her past, from a life she had tried to erase. She wanted to refuse, to defy him, but her memories betrayed her, flashing before her eyes in a swirl of violence and betrayal. "I don't want to remember," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't want to go back to that life." Ethan's expression softened for just a fraction of a second, a brief flicker of something that might have been regret, or was it sympathy? But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the cold, ruthless mask he had perfected over the years. "You don't have a choice," he said, his voice low and firm. "The Volkovs are closing in, and I'm giving you the chance to stay alive, to protect your daughter. The moment you help me, I'll make sure you're safe. I'll make sure she is safe. But if you refuse..." The door to the office suddenly swung open with a soft creak, interrupting whatever threat he had intended to finish. A man stepped into the room, tall and broad-shouldered, his face partially obscured by the shadows of the hallway. He looked familiar, someone from Evelyn's past. "Ethan," the man said, his voice low but urgent. "You need to see this." Evelyn's heart skipped. She recognized him immediately. Marco. He had been a part of the Volkovs' operations, their enforcer. The last time she had seen him, he had been holding a gun to her head, demanding information she didn't have. Ethan's eyes flicked to Evelyn for just a moment before he stood, his expression unreadable. "I'll be right there." Evelyn's chest tightened as Ethan turned to leave, but then something in her snapped. She had come this far. She had been pushed around by this world for too long. If she was going to be forced back into it, she wouldn't go quietly. "Wait," she called, her voice trembling but resolute. Ethan paused, looking back at her with an almost bored expression. "If you want me to help you," Evelyn said, her eyes flashing with a new fire, "then you need to promise me something. You need to promise that you won't hurt her. You won't hurt Lily." For the first time, Ethan's face softened, just the slightest fraction. His gaze shifted from her to the doorway, where Marco still stood, waiting. He nodded once, curtly. "Fine," he said, before turning on his heel and walking toward the door. "We'll talk more later. I'll hold up my end of the deal, just make sure you don't forget yours." As the door closed behind him, Evelyn was left alone in the cold silence of the room. The tension in her body refused to dissipate, her heart still pounding in her chest. She was back in the heart of Ethan's world, her only lifeline, and yet, her worst nightmare. What had she gotten herself into? A knock on the door jolted her out of her thoughts. She rose, but before she could even open it, the door creaked slightly open. A figure stood there, Marco, the enforcer. "Marco," she said, her voice stiff. "What is it?" His lips twisted into a grim smile, but his eyes were cold. "You're not alone in this, Evelyn. Not anymore." The door shut behind him with a soft thud, and Evelyn knew then, with a sickening certainty, that this was just the beginning. Evelyn's heart raced as she stood in the dimly lit hallway of the mansion, the silence of the house pressing in on her. It was well past midnight, the only sound the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional creak of the floorboards underfoot. She had just settled into bed when the knock on the door came, a sharp, urgent rapping that echoed too loudly in the stillness. Her first instinct was to ignore it, to pretend she hadn't heard. But the knock came again, louder this time, and with an edge that pulled her out of her uneasy slumber. Against her better judgment, she opened the door. Standing in front of her was a man she hadn't seen in years. Tommy. Her pulse skipped. Tommy was a figure from her past, someone she had trusted once, someone who had been close to Ethan in the early days, before everything had fallen apart, back when Evelyn had still been part of Ethan's world, and before she had managed to escape. "Tommy?" she whispered, her voice a mix of disbelief and confusion. "What the hell are you doing here?" Tommy, dressed in a dark jacket and jeans, his face drawn and tired, stepped into the room without waiting for an invitation. He closed the door behind him with a quiet click, and then looked at her with cold, hard eyes. There was no warmth in them, no familiarity, just a man on a mission. "I don't have time for pleasantries," he said, his voice low and rough. "We need to talk, and we need to talk now." Evelyn's heart sank. Something in the way he spoke, something about the urgency in his eyes, sent a shiver down her spine. "Talk about what?" she asked, crossing her arms over her chest as she tried to steady her breath. "You disappeared without a word, Tommy. The last time I saw you, you were part of Ethan's crew. What's going on?" Tommy's lips curled into a grim smile. "Ethan's not the man you think he is, Evelyn, and neither are you." The words hit her like a slap in the face. "What do you mean?" she demanded, her anger flaring up despite the confusion and fear that had settled over her. "What are you talking about?" Tommy stepped closer, his eyes darting toward the door, as if ensuring no one could overhear them. He lowered his voice to a near whisper. "Ethan's been playing both sides. He's working with the Volkovs." He paused, watching her reaction. "And he's using you as a pawn." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Evelyn's knees almost buckled as the gravity of his words sunk in. Ethan had promised her protection, told her he would keep her and Lily safe. But now, Tommy was telling her that Ethan wasn't the savior she'd believed him to be. He was working with the very people she had been running from, the people who had wanted her dead. "No," she whispered, shaking her head as if to dispel the thought. "You're lying." "I wish I were," Tommy replied, his voice bitter. "But I'm not. The Volkovs want you, Evelyn. They don't care about you or your daughter, they care about the information you have. And they've made me an offer, a very tempting one." Evelyn's stomach twisted. Her mind raced. She didn't want to believe it. Ethan had always been brutal, but he had also been protective. He had saved her once before, hadn't he? And now Tommy, the man who had once been her ally, was telling her that Ethan had sold them both out? "What does this mean?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "What do you want from me?" Tommy's gaze softened for a brief moment, and for the first time, Evelyn saw a flicker of something familiar. An old version of Tommy, the one who had once been her ally, her friend. "I'm offering you a way out, Evelyn," he said quietly. "A way to get away from Ethan, away from this life. The Volkovs might want you, but they'll keep their word if you give them the intel they want. I can take you and Lily somewhere safe. You don't have to stay here with him. You don't have to play his game anymore." Evelyn's breath caught. The idea of running again, of leaving Ethan's world behind for good, was both terrifying and tempting. She had wanted freedom. She had wanted safety. But Tommy's offer felt like a trap, and she wasn't sure she could trust him. "And you expect me to believe you?" she asked, her voice shaking with doubt. "After everything that's happened? After everything you've done?" Tommy didn't flinch. "I'm offering you a way out," he repeated. "You're trapped, Evelyn. I'm not the enemy here. Ethan is." For a long moment, Evelyn stood there, caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She had spent so many years trying to escape Ethan's grip. But now, with the truth laid bare before her, she was faced with a choice. Stay in the world that had held her captive for so long, or walk away again and trust someone who had already betrayed her once. "Why should I trust you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Tommy's gaze hardened, and for a moment, Evelyn saw the coldness in his eyes. She felt a pang of unease. Maybe she didn't know him as well as she thought. Maybe he wasn't the ally he claimed to be. "I'm doing this for Lily," Tommy said, his voice suddenly tight. "She deserves better than this world, Evelyn, and so do you." But the doubt lingered, gnawing at her. Tommy's words echoed in her mind, but the cold, calculating look in his eyes made her hesitate. Was he really trying to help, or was he just another player in a game she didn't understand? Before she could respond, there was a sharp knock on the door. The moment stretched painfully long. Tommy glanced at her, a shadow passing over his face. He knew she wasn't going to be able to make a decision right away. She wasn't ready. "I'll be waiting," he said quietly, before slipping out the door, leaving Evelyn alone with her thoughts. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest, her mind whirling. She was caught between two dangerous men, two dangerous forces, and she didn't know who to trust. Not anymore. Evelyn couldn't breathe. The weight of everything was suffocating her. Tommy's visit, his words, they had thrown her into a world of uncertainty. Her mind had raced all night, torn between the man she had once loved and the man who had turned into her worst fear. She needed answers, and she needed them now. The mansion felt like a tomb as she walked down the hallway, the soft click of her heels against the polished floor the only sound that filled the silence. When she reached Ethan's office, she paused for just a moment. He was inside. She could feel him, his presence, his power. She had been living under his roof, forced into his world again, but now it was time to face the truth. She knocked sharply on the door. The silence that followed was heavy, but she didn't wait for permission. She opened the door and stepped inside. Ethan was at his desk, his back to her as he studied a series of papers in front of him. He didn't look up as she entered, but he must have heard the door, for his voice came low, steady. "You're upset." Evelyn's pulse quickened. "I'm not upset," she said, her voice shaking with the tension that ran through her body. "I'm furious." He still didn't turn around. "You've every right to be." Evelyn couldn't keep the edge out of her voice. "I want the truth. All of it. Now." Ethan finally turned in his chair, his dark eyes locking onto hers. For a moment, they stood in silence, staring at one another. She could feel the weight of their shared history pressing in between them, but she couldn't focus on that right now. Not with everything on the line. "Tommy came to see me last night," Evelyn said, her voice cold and steady. "He told me everything about you, about the Volkovs, about the deal you've made behind my back. He said you've been playing both sides." Ethan's gaze didn't falter. "I won't deny it," he said, his voice measured. "I've been working with the Volkovs." Her heart sank. "You're really doing this? You've been using me to get to them? To protect yourself?" "No," Ethan replied sharply, rising from his chair. "Not to protect myself. To protect you. To protect us." Evelyn's head spun. "What do you mean?" He walked toward her, his every step deliberate, like a man who was about to make the most important decision of his life. "The Volkovs have been hunting you and Lily since the moment you disappeared. They want the information. You have the connections, the power, and they know I'm the only one who can get to you. If I didn't make the deal with them, they would have come after you with everything they had. No one would have been safe, especially not Lily." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. "So, what? You made a deal with the devil to keep us alive?" "Yes," he admitted, his voice tight. "But it wasn't just to save my own skin. It was to save yours. To give you and Lily a future, a chance at a life outside of the violence that surrounds us." Evelyn stared at him, her mind racing. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that Ethan wasn't the man she thought he was, that there was still some trace of the man she had once loved in him, but she couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, of being used again. "I don't know if I can trust you," she whispered, her heart heavy with doubt. Ethan stepped closer, his eyes softening just slightly. "You don't have to trust me. You just have to trust that I'll do whatever it takes to keep you both safe. Even if it means making deals with monsters like the Volkovs. I'll burn this world down to protect you, Evelyn." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and laden with meaning. Evelyn wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that his love for her, his obsession, was still the driving force behind his actions. But the truth was, she didn't know what to believe anymore. Before she could respond, the door flew open, and one of Ethan's men burst into the room, his face pale with panic. "Mr. Cross," the man said, his voice urgent. "It's Lily. She's gone." Evelyn froze. "What do you mean, gone?" Her voice was sharp, panicked. "Where is she?" "They took her," the man said, his eyes darting to Ethan. "The Volkovs. They took her." Evelyn's blood ran cold. All of Ethan's words, His promises, none of it mattered anymore. Lily was gone. The very thing she had been trying to protect was now in the hands of the people who had hunted them both for so long. "Get her back," Evelyn demanded, her voice hoarse with fear. "I don't care what it takes. Get my daughter back." Ethan's expression darkened, his jaw tightening. "We will. I'll go to war with the Volkovs if I have to. I'll tear their world apart to get her back." But Evelyn could see it in his eyes. The desperation. The fear. For the first time, she realized that Ethan's protection might not be enough. He might not be able to keep his promises this time. "I can't wait for you to save her," Evelyn said, her voice trembling with urgency. "I need to go now. I need to get her back, no matter the cost." Ethan's gaze softened for a moment, but then it hardened again. "If you leave now, you're on your own. You'll be walking straight into a war, Evelyn. It's too dangerous." "I don't care," she said, her decision made. "I will not let them hurt her. Not again." Without another word, she turned on her heel and left the room, determination burning in her chest. She didn't trust Ethan anymore, not completely, but she trusted herself, and she trusted that she would do anything to bring Lily back, even if it meant risking everything. The darkness outside the warehouse was suffocating, the only light coming from the occasional flicker of a distant street lamp, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch forever. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Every step Evelyn took toward the building felt like it could be her last. Ethan moved ahead, his presence as commanding as ever. He was a force of nature, cold and precise, his mind calculating every possible move. But Evelyn was no longer following him blindly. She was with him now, and the stakes had never been higher. "Stay close," Ethan muttered, his voice low but urgent. "We don't know how many men they have inside." Evelyn nodded, gripping the gun he had reluctantly handed her earlier. The cold metal felt heavy in her hands, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She had seen enough of Ethan's world to know that if she didn't act, Lily would be lost forever. The warehouse loomed ahead, a hulking mass of concrete and steel. The sounds of muffled voices and the occasional clink of metal echoed from within. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest, but she pushed the fear aside. She couldn't afford to be scared now. Lily needed her. Ethan motioned for her to stay behind as he moved closer to the entrance. With swift, practiced movements, he signaled to his men to surround the building. Evelyn watched him, her mind racing. The man she had once known loved was still there, but this was a different side of him, a side she couldn't deny. He was doing what he did best, controlling the situation, taking command. But Evelyn wasn't just a spectator anymore. She wasn't just someone to be protected. She was part of this world she had tried to escape, but now had no choice but to face. "Get ready," Ethan whispered, his eyes scanning the building. "The moment we breach that door, all hell will break loose." Without waiting for her response, he pushed the door open, the sound of metal scraping against concrete loud in the silence. The first gunshot rang out almost immediately, followed by the chaos of a full-blown firefight. The sharp crack of gunfire echoed in the dark, the harsh staccato rhythm of battle. Evelyn darted forward, her heart pounding as the noise intensified. She heard Ethan's voice bark orders, directing his men with deadly precision. But Evelyn was no longer just an observer. She moved through the shadows, keeping low, her instincts honed by the months of fear she had lived under. This was her fight now, too. She rounded a corner, her gun raised, her breath shallow. The warehouse was a maze of crates and broken equipment. She had no idea where Lily was, but she knew one thing: she would find her, no matter what. Another shot rang out, and Evelyn froze. She wasn't alone. A figure stepped from behind a stack of crates, a gun aimed directly at her. Before she could react, the figure was gone. Ethan's man had taken the shot. He nodded toward her without a word, and Evelyn felt a rush of gratitude, even in the middle of the chaos. "Move!" Ethan barked over the comms, and she snapped back into focus. They were getting closer. Through the haze of gunfire and chaos, Evelyn saw her. Lily. Her daughter was bound to a chair in the center of the room, her eyes wide with fear, but alive. Evelyn's heart leapt. She moved toward her, every step filled with urgency. The sound of approaching footsteps made her turn, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. A man lunged at her, his gun raised, but Evelyn was quicker. She fired, her aim steady, her pulse calm. The man fell, and the room went silent. Ethan appeared beside her, his eyes scanning the surroundings. He knelt next to Lily, his hand gentle as he untied the ropes around her daughter's wrists. "You're safe now," he said softly, his voice raw with something she couldn't quite place. He looked at Evelyn, his expression unreadable. "We're not out of this yet." Evelyn didn't respond. She reached for Lily, pulling her into her arms. Her daughter clung to her, her sobs muffled against her chest. The warehouse was still tense, but the immediate danger had passed. Evelyn looked at Ethan, her mind whirling. The battle was over, but the war was far from it. She was standing at a crossroads, one she had been dreading for so long. Ethan had kept his word. He had saved Lily, but at what cost? She knew she could never go back to this life. No matter how much she still felt for him, no matter the fire that still burned between them, she couldn't stay. Not in this world. Not with this violence always lurking just behind them. "Lily and I are leaving," she said, her voice firm, her decision made. "We're going to start over, somewhere far away from this." Ethan's expression tightened, his jaw clenching. For a moment, he seemed like the man she once knew, the man who would do anything for her. But that man was gone, replaced by the cold, calculating figure standing in front of her now. "Don't do this," he said, his voice low, pleading in a way she hadn't expected. "You can't leave. You don't understand what this world will do to you." Evelyn shook her head, tears pricking her eyes as she held Lily tighter. "I understand enough, Ethan. I've seen enough." She turned, her back to him, and with one final glance, she walked away. Ethan didn't stop her. As they stepped into the night, Evelyn's heart was heavy, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt a glimmer of hope. She wasn't running anymore. She was choosing a future for her and Lily, far from the shadows of the past. And for the first time, she believed it could be enough.